Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Identity Crisis. I'm Kelsey Cheng from Caixin Global, and delighted to be your host today. Now, a quick show of hands. Who here has seen a deepfake video? Yeah? Okay, keep your hand up only if you could tell right away that it was fake. Yeah? One person. One person. And that's the issue that we're here to tackle today. A lot of us have encountered deepfake videos, but not a lot of us can identify one, can spot one right away. So the rise of AI agents, deepfakes, and social media bots is becoming a concerning part of our everyday reality now. Deepfakes can mimic world leaders, bots can amplify false narratives, and AI-generated content can deceive even the most discerning eyes. How do we distinguish between real and fake in an online world where the lines between human and artificial are increasingly blurred? Luckily, as the threats evolve, so do the solutions. Today, we have a panel of experts who are at the forefront of researching and developing cutting-edge tools for AI detection. We have, on my far right, Adrian Ludwig, Chief Technology Officer at Tools for Humanity, where he is building the world's most inclusive identity and financial network. Ben Colman, CEO and co-founder of Reality Defender, a deepfake detection platform helping companies and governments flag fraudulent users and content. And finally, we have Sinan Aral, author and professor at MIT with pioneering research in misinformation and who is now applying AI to combat its effects. Thank you for being with us today, and let's jump right in. So this first question will be for all of you. How worried exactly should we be about deepfakes, and where are the areas most threatened by it? Adrian, could you start us first?
So I think broadening out, is that working? I can't tell. There we go. So broadening out a little bit just from deepfakes to all of the situations where AI is affecting our ability to interact with the internet. Day in and day out, you probably experience it and don't even really think too much about it. You might be playing an online game and then realize the people you're competing against aren't really people. You might be looking on a social website and realizing that you don't trust any of the feedback that you're getting from people that you don't know personally. They may not be real. You don't necessarily know whether the person that you're plus oneing on a dating website is a real account or somebody that's trying to manipulate you. And time again, you think, it's not that big a deal. I'm navigating it, it's fine. But what it's actually doing is eroding your willingness to trust anything that you're finding online. And so I think as we're seeing that affect how we interact on a personal level across all of the different places that we're interacting, we should be pretty worried. I think it's beginning to affect the types of relationships that we have in all spheres of our lives. And so in that sense, I think it's time for us to make some very foundational changes. And at least from my perspective, it comes down to understanding, am I interacting with a person, a real human, or am I interacting with something that has ulterior motivations and I can't tell what it is because it's completely artificial?
Thanks, Adrian. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. At Reality Defender and personally, our focus is on helping companies, organizations, consumers tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. And obviously, building on everything that has already been said, the real challenge here is that there's over 1 million different free or nearly free tools online that allow anybody, whether it's my 7-year-old son or my 70-year-old mother, to make a perfect deepfake without any technical experience. It's not like a computer virus. We needed a CS degree. You need to be able to program. You could just Google fake face generator, take a photo of you on stage, 3 seconds of audio, make a perfect match. And that's what makes it incredibly scary in the absence of any regulations.
And what are the risks? And I understand, Sinan, you have some personal experience with deepfakes yourself?
Yeah, so for me, this question is about what keeps me up at night. And there are 3 things that keep me up at night with regard to misinformation and now deepfakes and AI. And that's health misinformation, elections, and then corporate and personal fraud. I think those are the top 3 sort of risks. The consequences are large, but they're subtle. So take health misinformation, for example. 7 million people died from COVID. 28% of people are still unvaccinated. And a study by the CDC showed that the population-adjusted factor behind why people are unvaccinated, 84% is due to vaccine hesitancy. That should give you a sense of the potential consequences, because misinformation is a huge part of vaccine hesitancy. When it comes to elections, we published a paper in Science that shows that it does have an effect on elections. And it's not through the ways that you might think. It's not by changing who people vote for, but by moving the needle on voter turnout in one direction or another. And we've actually seen a massive experiment from Facebook that shows that they can do this with millions of people involved in the experiment. And the final one is corporate and personal fraud, and hundreds of millions of dollars are lost every year to this type of attack. For corporations, where it's either a phishing scam or identity theft or a fraudulent transaction is approved. And it could also be personal. We've all had grandmothers or mothers who've been targeted by text messages and calls to run to the bank and make a transfer. And yes, I do have personal experience. I was deep-faked in a scam with George Clooney to sell a trading algorithm, which eventually scammed thousands, if not tens of thousands of people out of £1,000 per go. And it was very scary and very real.
Yeah, very scary for both yourself, George Clooney, and the
I'm
people
sure
who
George,
were targeted.
I'm sure George Clooney was very scared, yes.
Thank you, Sinan, and the rest. Definitely a good list of red flags. So moving on to each of your work and insights, I'd like to say for you, Sinan, your early work on misinformation helped shape how we think about the spread of false information online. Given the rise of Gen AI, what role do AI models play in accelerating or perhaps in the end mitigating misinformation?
So I think in order to really understand this, you have to zoom out from an individual deep fake and go from a particular instance to the system level. I think that's where you can really understand the real threat. And two things to note about that, and that's coordinated optimization and personalization. So what do I mean? So instead of just thinking about deepfakes as a random false event, think about a system that can coordinate and optimize millions of deepfakes in order to generate, at low marginal success, enough profit to make it real for the system. That could be in moving the needle on an election or generating millions of dollars in successful corporate fraud. And so when you have an optimized system that's coordinated, take, for example, an election. It's not random misinformation. It will be a system that targets key swing regions or states, targets key vulnerable individuals within those places, where each of the issues is targeted at those regions, at those people in a systematic way, and then it's optimized. So all of the click-through rates and view-through rates are being ingested and used to optimize the likelihood of future click-through rates and view-through rates, and therefore success. And the second one is personalization, and this is definitely true for AI-generated deepfakes or any other type of misinformation today compared to, say, 5 years ago, which is that the misinformation will now be personalized to you. It will understand not only your preferences and what you've seen before, but it will use your name, and it will be George Clooney saying your name rather than, or some other information that will include personal details that will make it seem real. And these system-level optimizations are what make it very scary.
Very dire stuff. For Ben, Reality Defender works at the cutting edge of deepfake detection. What are the biggest challenges in keeping that technology ahead of what's happening there?
Yeah, I think that the real question is this a cat and mouse game?
Yeah.
Is this, as they say in the US, is it whack-a-mole? And the answer is that yes, it is, but it's also true of all of cybersecurity. We see it much more as a feature than a bug. Yeah. We're not only responsible for building models and updating models across audio and video and images, but also creating the properly distributed data sets and scenarios that support that. So for example, if everyone looks like me in our data set, well, then our models won't be good on people who do not look like me. And so not only creating these billions of corpuses of both real and AI-generated media, we're also now partnering with generative AI companies, platforms like 11 Labs and PlayHC that were used in the deepfake of President Biden during the election, that were used even overnight with the deepfake we saw of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, which I won't get into, but you guys can all Google it, and it's on the front page of the New York Times. And so given that a lot of these platforms are free or available to anybody with a credit card or a Google search away, the opportunity is in the absent regulations to partner on a data side so we can be able to more easily understand potential nefarious use before the models hit the public.
Thank you, Ben. And Adrian, the World Project is pioneering proof of personhood as a way to distinguish humans from AI. But some argue that biometrics and decentralized identity come with privacy risk. So how do you balance between verifying real people and protecting personal data?
Yeah, I think there's a couple points that I want to touch on in the context of that question. The first was that I thought Sinan did a really nice job of outlining why having more personal data is so risky, right? As AI becomes more and more sophisticated, all of the personal data that's been put onto the web about you as an individual, all of that identity information makes it easier to trick you.
Yeah.
That personalization, that ability to generate content that fits directly into the mental model that you're expecting, the ability to manipulate how it is that you will respond is exactly the problem that we want to confront. And ultimately, the approaches that have been described so far are, to Ben's point, that whack-a-mole approach that we're so used to in the security space. And as an architect, when I see those two confluence of problems, the question that I begin to ask myself is, how can we change the foundation upon which the system is built? Because the system that we have right now encourages users to put more and more identity information about themselves out there. It, at the same time, says, we're going to use that against you in the context of AI. And in security, there's a thing that we refer to as a root of trust, right? A thing that is the foundational element upon which the entire system's security is predicated. And there really isn't a root of trust right now for being a human on the internet. And so that's what World has been working on, is how do we define the difference between a human and not a human as simply and basically as possible, and in doing so, minimize the need for every single person to provide a ton of identifying information about themselves in order to use those services. Because right now, that's how you try to establish that you're real. Yeah. You give up more and more of your identity. You give up where you live. You give up a credit card. You give your age. You provide all of this information to a service that doesn't really need it, other than that they're trying to fight the bot problem that they have within their service. And so that gets us to a situation where our service, by using a biometric, but doing so in a privacy-preserving way. There's a variety of technologies that we've put in place and an architecture that we've designed so that your personal data is not connected in any way to the identity for the services that are using World ID. It actually eliminates the need to have identity in the way that we classically think of it, describing who you are personally in order to use those services, from the equation altogether. And so that's the approach that we've been taking, is how do you have proof of humanness be able to not need to know who you are, not need to know what nationality you are, not need to know your name or your age or your phone number or your email address or any of those things. You just establish that this is a human, and then you can use all the services that you always have in an almost truly anonymous way.
Okay, really looking forward.
Can I,
yeah.
I mean, if I could respectfully challenge that.
Sure.
I think a lot of the scariest deepfakes we've seen have not been great deepfakes, and they've happened in areas of the internet that don't follow provenance or watermarking, any kind of proof of anything. Looking at deepfakes propagating across elections on Telegram or WhatsApp, things shared on 4chan and other social media platforms. I think the risk is of focusing purely on potential provenance solutions. Says that there's only one solution, but the problem is when that solution is wrong, it's 100% wrong. I don't think there's any silver bullet here. I don't think Reality Defender is the only way, or only tool, but it's among a kind of a collection of different tools that provide different types of risk metrics. When combined, can provide a higher likelihood of confidence of whether something is potentially fraudulent or not. I do kind of hope there's a way to collaborate there, but I think there's a danger there in saying that a provenance tool, a proof of X, somehow solves everything, when in reality, bad actors just ignore it completely.
I wasn't suggesting that I was going to solve everything. I just think it would be really nice to have a root of trust for identity, and we don't have one now.
Yeah.
I think what we saw in the PC era, 25 years ago when I was beginning working on security, was that without a hardware root of trust, it was impossible to fight viruses. Without a robust sandbox tied to a hardware root of trust, it was impossible to build mobile applications that provided protections for personal data on mobile operating systems. And so this is the same situation. It's great to have scanning technologies that look at content and try to understand what's going on inside that content, but that's always going to be a cat and mouse game. And it's important to have a few additional pieces of information about where that information might have come from, who created it. Is it the same person that has been consistently violating the terms of service that's uploading this piece of content or not? And if you can provide that in a private way, as we're trying to do, that's going to be, I think, an incredible asset to facilitate the types of technologies that you're building as well.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. And so moving on to the last round, we'd like to get your advice for the audience. What would you recommend to individuals or organizations who are concerned about exactly what you've mentioned? Ben, let's have you go first for this one.
I think the good news is the tools are available, whether it's Reality Defender, other types of tools, whether it's privacy-preserving tools. I think a lot of it is in terms of education. A lot of organizations just don't think it's a problem because they don't think it's actually happened to them. The answer is it has happened to them, whether they realize it or not. And the challenge is right now is where you can actually do things that require a lot of compute. But tools like Reality Defender can now live on cloud and on device, even on mobile phones as well. So I think that looking forward a few years, that'll look very much like the early days of antivirus software. Initially you had to buy software, scan each thing. Ultimately, it'll be all the time in real time. And using platforms like ours, potentially integrating with other platforms as well, provenance and inference. And there's a lot of ways organizations and consumers can make conscious decisions to protect themselves.
And Sinan, what's your advice?
Well, I think that we are in an arms race, and we are sort of in an onslaught of rise of misinformation and identity deception. And I actually think that these two solutions are complements in the sense that we need all the tools that we can get. We need tools for anonymous authentication so we can trust where information is coming from, but we also need to scan and verify this massive wave of deception so that we know where the problem areas are and which things to concentrate on. And my advice to either individuals or organizations, essentially, is that when you're in an arms race and you're facing a wave of something you're trying to avoid, that you have to focus on mission-critical, high-priority items. And what I mean by that is attacks on mission-critical people, data, or systems, if you're a corporation or a government, and even if you are an individual, the fraud that targets your bank account may be more important than the fraud that targets your parking permit. So there are layers of sort of priority, and when faced with a deluge of misinformation or deception, that prioritization becomes incredibly important. So focusing on that which is mission critical first is important.
Thank you. And Adrian, what's your advice?
So when I'm looking at the world right now and thinking about AI risks, we're very excited, right? AI is in the news every single day. We talk about the challenges that it's going to be. Oh my gosh, it could be any number of bleak situations. The reality is, a year from now, we will have normalized our expectations for what is acceptable. And we're going to be seeing deepfakes every day. We're going to be seeing spam every day. We're going to be seeing manipulation of our social networks every day. And the risk that we've seen for technologies is, as that becomes normal, we think it's acceptable, and we stop trying to fight it. So my one piece of advice is, that little bit of fear that you're seeing right now and not knowing how bad it's going to get, use that to motivate some structural changes, right? Think about what are the tools that should be deployed in your environment. Think about how is it that having a root of trust for identity that is privacy preserving and at a global scale could fundamentally change what is normal and what is acceptable and make it a more positive environment, right? When I think about the internet, I go back almost 30 years ago to when I first started interacting with it. And there was this deep sense of optimism that every time you would interact with a social site, you'd be meeting a new member of your community, that you'd be interacting with them, that you would learn about some new thing that you could trade on eBay, or some newsletter that was on a website that used the Blink font. And it was just so exciting that there were all of these other people that were out there. And the cynicism that we have now about what it means to interact on the web is a profound shift. And what I would like to get back to is a point where when I was interacting with those sites, I knew that I was interacting with a human, and I began to have some of those types of experiences again. So I think the advice is just don't let the bad things that are happening now be your expectation. Think about what changes you can put in place to make it a better web.
Could I piggyback on that?
Yeah.
So Adrian said something at the beginning of this panel that really I want people not to forget, which is that all of human sort of societal advances, collaboration, coordination, communication, our ability to accomplish things in groups depends fundamentally on trust. And that risk is really one of the most important risks that we face, which is that as trust is eroded, our ability to communicate, cooperate, coordinate to solve global challenges becomes harder and harder and harder, and we should therefore remain vigilant.
Yeah, fundamentally, it's building back trust.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you. Great session. And thank you so much for our speakers. That brings us to the end of our discussion. A huge thank you for such great advice. And it's clear from our conversation today that the battle for digital authenticity is far from over. As AI become more advanced, so must our approaches to verifying identity, detecting deception, and preserving trust online. So through awareness, high priority items, and employing the right tools, we must work together to ensure the online world stays a safe place for everybody. So whether you're a business leader navigating digital risk or developing the next AI tool for detection, we hope this session has been helpful to you. Thank you so much again to all three speakers, and enjoy the rest of Web Summit Qatar. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.